The raid testing for Season 2 has been completed. We have now seen every boss on Heroic and Mythic except for the last one, and today I will summarize what we saw. Starting with the Lair boss, Nymrissa Wavecaller in the Tidebrown Grotto. This is a single boss raid. It was advertised as a replacement for war bosses, but it is an actual boss with actual difficulties and actual loot. It is much like Chimeras in that it is a one boss raid that is part of the raid tier. The main mechanic of the boss is a set of 12 frost orbs that need to be soaked before they explode. Soaking a frost orb gives the soaking player a stacking debuff, so you need to split up who soaks the orbs. It was possible to use immunes or AMS to not get the debuff, but the immune player still had to stagger soaks as they did AoE damage to the raid as well. The boss has an ad phase where murlocs come in from all four sides and you have to kill them before they reach the middle. CCs work on them, so the strat will probably involve hard CCing or gripping farm murlocs. The boss enrages at 6 minutes with massive AoE pulsing damage. Nymrissa drops loot at myth 1 out of 6, meaning she is probably intended to be first boss level difficulty, like Imperator Aversion. I think it will probably be easier than Chimeras was. It is also flex mythic like Sporefall, but we don't know how the lockout will work yet. The only notable piece of loot from Nymrissa is a passive int trinket that seems to be one of the best int trinkets, kinda like Gaze, but only for int. The rest of her loot table is just generic items, and a lot of them have verse. Moving on to the Venomous Abyss, which is the main raid of the tier, it is an 8 boss raid. The structure is such that you kill the first boss, split into 2 wings, and then converge back for the last 3 bosses. And the first boss was looking kind of insane. Nek'zali the Soulcoiler was possibly the most intense first boss I've ever seen on testing. We somehow had some infinitely spawning ads, and we were getting overrun with ads until they eventually overpowered us. These restless Amani ads spawn at the sides and run towards the middle. They have a shield which needs to be broken, and when it is broken they will stop running and start hitting the tank. This shield only takes magic damage, meaning physical classes can't really help with the mechanic. And there is meant to be a way to burn their corpses, but I think it wasn't working because the ads never stopped spawning. We had over 50 ads on screen at some point. Apart from that, there is also a downstairs phase where a small group goes into the center and kills a single ad in a different phase, much like Kel'Thuzad's Phylactery. Now, I think this is a kind of weird boss because it's pretty rare for the first boss to have different phases, comp restrictions, and group assignments, so I wouldn't be surprised if it is made easier before it goes to live. The second boss, Entombed Sentinels, is basically a remake of Cauldron of Carnage. It is a 2-target boss, there are 2 boss enemies, and they must be tanked separately with the raid in 2 different groups. The arena is quite small, and dot classes like Boomy and Shadow Priest can hit both golems. At the end of each phase, the 2 golems clash in the center, again like Cauldron of Carnage, but they are actually immune to damage at this point, so you cannot 2-target cleave them. During this phase, everyone has a symbol above their head corresponding to the number 1, 2, or 3, and the goal is to match everyone's number to make a 4. The phase ends when everyone matches, meaning you want to do it as fast as possible to get back to doing damage. In Mythic, failing this addition mechanic will result in 4 players dying and a massive puddle spawning, probably causing a wipe. This boss definitely looks like a second boss, pretty chill in Mythic. Then we have the Lost Explorers, which is the 3-target council boss of the tier, but instead of being based around a class, it's just 3 turtles. 2 of the 3 turtles are tankable and movable, but the third one, Trader Gebo, just circles around the room with no threat table. If all 3 turtles are together, they are immune to damage, so the entire fight is 2 stacked targets and 1 spread target. Throughout the fight, there are boxes that spawn and must be soaked. 1 box per phase will contain a fish, which you feed to a turtle to reset the boss energy. After being fed, the turtle will cast his ultimate. First mate Nama's ultimate is 3 soaks. There is no damage taken increase with them, so 1 person can soak multiple times. Scroll Sage EQ's ultimate puts 5 fire circles on range players and 5 ice circles on melee players. After dropping these circles, the players must walk to the opposite element patch on the ground to clear it. And Trader Gebo's ultimate puts a mushroom on the ground and summons a fire wave. Stepping into the mushroom will launch you into the air to dodge the fire wave, much like last boss of Windrunner Spire. I do think this boss is ultimately quite simple, and the ultimates are not incredibly punishing. Vashnik the Malignant is the 4th boss. It is a single target with some slime ads spawning every phase. There are 3 altars on the sides of the room. The boss will summon slimes from 2 altars at a time, and also gain abilities based on the altars he empowers. The orange altar summons slimes that explode with a bursting stack. The purple altar summons mass slimes that drop swirlies, and the red altar summons a big slime that splits into smaller slimes. The boss summons slimes from the 2 closest altars, and if he summons from the same altar twice, these slimes will be empowered, meaning he will have to rotate around the room for each set. There is also a wave mechanic like the last boss of Arakara, and on Mythic there are tumors that you must hit with these waves. When this boss was initially tested, it was incredibly bugged. It had bad visuals, it had nameplate clutter, raid flame clutter, and was a pretty crazy mechanic check, but they retested it this week and it was all fixed and everything seemed to flow well. The boss doesn't seem too hard. I don't expect it to be a wall, but it might be a bit harder than previous bosses. Sszorak is the 5th boss, and this is where the raid could potentially get hard. He is a full single target boss, which is nice after that was left out in Season 1. There are some damage amps on the boss, but they are only 30%, and they are at somewhat awkward times. The fight is very pushback focused. There are a lot of mechanics that reposition you, like this one, where everyone gets a circle with a line that knocks you in that direction. If you collide with someone in the air, you will both stop flying and land on the ground, so you want to match your line with someone opposing you. There are a lot of tornadoes to dodge. If you ever get hit, you get a poison dot, so poison dispels can be useful. And on Mythic, there is a soak and spread mechanic, where everyone must quickly run out with plus or X shaped lines coming out of them. At the end of each phase, the boss will dig in, standing still with a 30% damage amp and causing strong wind pushbacks. The way to negate these pushbacks is to pop the green circular orb, which will knock everyone away from it and slow the winds for a few seconds. The orb is placed by players before the phase, and there is a nice visual showing where the winds will come from to decide where to place your orb. The damage amp timers are kind of awkward. They don't really line up with anything until the 6-minute amp. Note that nobody actually got this far in Mythic, so these times are estimations. I think this boss definitely looks more punishing than the previous ones and could potentially be somewhat difficult. The 6th boss is the Twin Fangs. This is a permanent stacked 2-target boss. The hitboxes are pretty big, so most class abilities will hit both bosses, but there are maybe a few that do not. The main gimmick of the fight is these green debuff stacks. Once you hit a certain amount of stacks, you will die. On Mythic, it is 7 stacks. Getting hit by any green mechanic will give you 1 stack, and you can clear only 1 stack per phase. There are some green orbs to soak that give you these stacks. There are 3 small ads that spawn in the middle and give people these stacks for as long as they're alive, so you definitely need to kill these ads pretty fast. On Mythic, there are kick ads. These ads are like Salhadar ads in that you kick them once and they will disappear. Each set of kick ads has 14 separate kicks. They spawn in set locations but in a random order. We found a protection paladin helps a lot to make the mechanic easier. I think the amount of kicks definitely seems very excessive, but because they spawn in set locations, it will probably be not too hard when it is assigned. At the end of each phase, there will be a red 3-step soak that removes 1 stack from everyone, and then the worms will burrow. One will go to the mid and do a beam that you will rotate around. I think this boss definitely could be hard. The stack mechanic makes it such that if you fail any mechanics early, you will die later on, and the kick mechanic makes it such that if anyone is dead, a kick will likely go off, meaning that correct execution is very important. The 7th and penultimate boss is the Coiled Altar. It is a 3-phase boss. The first phase, we fight Zul'Jahn, and the main mechanic is these green orbs. People can run into green orbs to pick them up, and a few seconds later, they will drop. The boss has a frontal that clears the orbs, so the idea is you drop all the orbs in a clump and then clear them. Phase 2 is a lot more chaotic. There is a mind control mechanic like Jailer, where a few players get mind controlled and then run to jump off the edge unless you break their shield. There are some ads that are spread and you must kick. They do not move, but when you kick them, they blink in a random direction. There is a circle mechanic you must take out, and it spawns 3 spirits that you must collect or you will die. And there are ghosts that chase certain players. If you look at your ghost, it will stop moving, but if you look away, it will start moving towards you. These ghosts, like orbs in phase 1, get cleared by a tank frontal, so the goal is to clump them up. After ending P2, the boss will phase into a damage amp that is partially an execute, and then phase 3 will be a 2-target phase with mechanics from both phase 1 and 2. This boss definitely looks like it could be challenging. And the final boss, Ula'tek, was not revealed on PTR. The only things we have are the arena and the dungeon journal. This is the arena. From what we can see, it is probably the smallest end boss arena ever, but the sides of the room are gated by these venom walls, so they will probably come into play at some point. And there is a mechanic in phase 3 where the boss demolishes the platform, so phase 3 probably uses a different arena. The dungeon journal has 3 phases and an intermission. There are a lot of ads. There is one ad called Heart of Ula'tek that has a damage amp on it. There are eggs you need to pick up, and there are a bunch of other mechanics that we will have to wait and see. Now, the loot from this raid does seem to be better distributed than the last raids. There are a bunch of good passive trinket options from the early bosses. There are weapons from early bosses for every type of weapon. The 4th boss drops a staff, and both the 2nd and 4th boss drop a 2-hand strength weapon. Of course, heavily debated is the last 2 bosses dropping 9 out of 6 mythic loot. They did recently add 2 pieces to the Coiled Altar drop table, such that every armor type has 2 armor drops from the boss. Some rings and necks have this effect that reduces deadly venom damage. It is not very relevant. It is just the green acid pools in the environment of the raid. For the classes that would be good in this raid, it does look like Spread Cleave is good for early bosses. So things like Boomy, Shadow Priest, Destrolook could be useful. But keep note that only the early bosses are spread for the entire encounter, so I think these classes are potentially going to be overhyped again, like they were in the current season. The later bosses seem to have a lot of 2-target, so things like Frost Mage and Arms Warrior could have potential. Rogue looks pretty bad right now, and there are bosses where a Trophic doesn't work great, like Sszorak does 50% of his damage with an environmental effect. But I think for now it is a bit pointless to speculate because this is all tuning based and we don't actually know what kind of damage or utility will matter on these bosses. It also doesn't seem like any of these bosses are mandatory grip bosses, but we haven't seen the last boss. Overall, I've been happy with the raid testing. The bosses look like they could be good. There were some bugs with the first round of raid testing, but when the second round came around, they fixed them. I am a bit concerned about the difficulty curve again. The first 4 bosses looked kind of chill, so I really hope they tune it well such that the raid doesn't end up being one big wall where every guild gets to and waits for a nerf. As always, this is just an initial view from PTR testing. Sometimes they will rework or retune bosses after PTR, but Lauren was quite different when it came to live, for example, so this video might be a bit outdated by the time the content releases.